Super Rugby weekend games, folks. 3 games on the Saturday, 1 on the Sunday. We're going to go through some squads and predictions and stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how the games may or may not go this weekend. The first one, Chiefs and Force. Chiefs, I don't have to tell you, are big-time favourites to get the job done in Hamilton. The Force, even if they don't win, they certainly need to lift their performance levels from last week, because last week they were kind of bad against the Highlanders. The Chiefs also, though, didn't exactly set the world alight with their win, but they're certainly at a better place in their season with 8-4 compared to the Force's 2-9. Now, the Chiefs have had some COVID cases in their camp, so we may expect the starting lineup to change if any guys test positive before kickoff. But as I have last seen it, Slater's getting a start at hooker this week, so Tokiaho is on the bench. Va'i is into the second row. He's back into the 23. So Kula gets a start this week on the blind side after being on the bench last week. Kane and Jacobson are still there at 7 and 8. Gatlin gets a start ahead of Josh Ioane, who's not in the squad this week. Maybe he's one of the COVID cases. It wouldn't surprise me. The rest of the back line, though, is pretty stable. Tupaia and Pohipi in the midfield. Narawa, Tia wings, and then Trask at fullback. I mean, Tupaia is one of the top guys this year for run meters, but he certainly fell off a few too many tackles last week, so that'll be something he'll be looking to improve on. For the Force, they have also made a few changes, but not kind of wholesale. Kaitu'u gets a start at hooker, and he is captain this week. Pugh comes in at number 8. I'm not sure if I've seen Jackson Pugh play before, but Tim Anstey has shifted to 7 to make way for him. Fergus Lee Warner, who's like the third guy for carries and one of the top offloaders, is still at the blind side, one of my favourites. Even if he did miss one tackle last week, which probably led to a try. Anyway, McIntyre gets a crack at 10, which means Pasitoa moves to 12. Is it the first time we've seen Pasitoa move to 12? He's mostly been playing at 10 this season. And Tony Pulu is in. Manasa Mataele is unfortunately ill. He's been one of their main strike weapons. I didn't see that it was COVID, just that he's ill. So, yeah, that's a pity, but good to see Tony Pulu back. And remember, Richard Kahui was cleared of his red card that he got last week, so he is free to play up against his old team. Stats-wise, these are two of the highest passing teams in Super Rugby, actually. These guys both like a wee bit of ball. I think it's 1 and 2. The Chiefs 1 and the Force 2 for the most passes per game. But I would hazard a guess that the Chiefs' conversion rate from all that ball is a wee bit higher than the Force. The Force offloads 6 or 7 times a game. The Chiefs more than 10. So they truly like chucking the ball around. I mentioned their favourites, 24 points with the bookies and 21 points with the Rugby Forecast algorithm. So the Chiefs at home on Saturday predicted to get the job done fairly well. Next game is the Hurricanes and Rebels. So another game here in NZ. Sky Stadium for this one. The Hurricanes are another team, like at 7-5, we're still not 100% where the Canes are at. Like, the Canes are the only team who've beaten the Blues, and they're the only team who's lost to Moana Pacifica. So the Blues have only lost 1, and the Moana Pacifica boys have only won 1. So they're such a weird team that you do feel like they could literally lose to anyone, but could literally beat anyone, depending on how they play. But with 7-5, they've clearly been winning more than they're losing, so that's at least encouraging. For the Rebels, last week against the Chiefs, man, I do feel like they threw that game away a little bit. Their defense has been pretty terrible, and it didn't hold up last week. And you're playing the Canes, who are one of the top sides for cracking sides open, so it could get messy if they continue to tackle the way they have done, but we will see how things go. For the Canes, Ruben Love's at fullback this week. Geordie Barrett is still in the midfield. That's a duck. I think I just heard a duck outside my house. Anyway, what was I saying? Blake Gibson's in at 6. TK Howden moves to number 8. Petanata's back from his All Blacks rest at 9. Or was it a goose? Some kind of honking bird. Rayasi's the second guy for... first equal. So not second. First equal for clean breaks. So the Rebels will need to keep an eye on that guy. Billy Proctor gets a start at 13. Mafaleo gets a start at loose head after being on the bench last week. Remember, the Hurricanes scrum was absolutely under the pump a wee bit last week, so that's going to be an area they'll have to improve. But are the Rebels a team that can put pressure on them in that area? Not so sure. But, I mean, they do have big Pone Fa'aumosili, so we will see. But, yeah, it's a little bit of tinkering from the Canes without kind of changing the whole lot. For the Rebels, Tamati Ioane is in at number 8. He's a big unit, so we'll see if he gets any big ball carries. Matt Tu'umua is back at 12. He's been out for a long time, so that's maybe a bit of good news, but he is in at 12. So Carter Gordon, who's been pretty solid this season, still starts at 10. Reece Hodges still at 15. So you got 3 pretty useful playmakers there. Andrew Callaway is in the midfield for this one, so it's not like the biggest midfield. Front row is Gibbon, Uelese, and Fa'aumosili, like I mentioned, so pretty same as last week. Leota moves into the second row this week with Tamati Ioane at number 8. Matt Phillips been their kind of main line-out guy, so if the Hurricanes want to shut down what the Rebels are doing, stopping that guy at line-out time would be a good start. The Hurricanes, like I mentioned, they have some dangerous attackers. They are second in the competition for generating clean breaks, behind only the Blues. The Rebels are last, and the Rebels have the lowest tackling percentage. So on paper, that looks like that could get really messy. Interestingly, the Rebels line-out is better than the Canes, though. They're third best at completing their own line-outs, whereas the Canes are kind of like 8th, so down the wrong end of the table. So we'll see how things go. Rebels are big-time underdogs, man. 18 points with the bookies. Canes win. And 20 points with the algorithm. Brumbies Blues is maybe the game to watch. It's over in Australia. 10-2, 11-1. 2 teams right up the top end of the table. The Brumbies did drop their second game of the season last week at home to the Crusaders. And the Blues were pretty impressive against another strong Aussie team in the Reds. When I say strong, they gave them a hiding. So this will be a really fascinating game to see how it plays out. The Brumbies are bolstered by the return of Noa Lolesio. I know he was really missed last week. I mean, Rodney Iona is a capable guy, but he had a bit of rust, I think, over a few weeks of not playing. So, yeah, that's certainly really, really good news for the Brumbies. They still don't have Valtini back, but Lolesio, I think, is about a bigger boost as you could want. Whainga'a is also starting at hooker this week. Luke Romer's starting at 7. Yeah, otherwise it's pretty much the same lineup that played last week. They're putting, I mean, Scotty Sio, I should say, also starts at loose head, so Slippers down to the bench. But otherwise, yeah, it's still Tom Banks, Tom Wright. Tom Wright's got 8 tries this year. He's like the second top try scorer, so behind Whainga Anuku from the Crusaders. So, yeah, man, the Brumbies lineup is pretty tidy. The Blues have likewise not made a whole heap of changes. Sam Derry's back in the locks, so Tom Robinson moves to a more familiar 6 jersey, but he was all right at lock. Yeah, the front row is the same. Hodgman, Eklund, and Tuangafasi. Bryce Heem is in at 13, because remember, Rico tweaked his hammy last week, so Heem's in at 13 alongside Tui Basashek. Caleb Clark's got 7 tries, so look out for both sides. Guys on the wings this week. Clark up against Wright could be a pretty interesting one. But I mean, Kurt Eklund has got 6 tries. So we talk a lot about the Brumbies maul. The Blues and Brumbies maul at pretty much exactly the same amount per game across the season. The Brumbies success rate with their maul is ever so slightly higher than the Blues, but both these sides like a maul. And both these sides have got some pretty good, exciting outside backs. So yeah, this could be a really fun one. Interestingly, the Blues play with only 47% possession this season, so they are not a team that needs to dominate possession. They are very good at hitting teams on the counter, first on clean breaks, like I mentioned earlier. I mentioned the mauls are pretty much the same, but interestingly, the Brumbies concede fewer clean breaks than the Blues. So is it going to be the Blues attack or the Brumbies defense which holds? It will be an interesting battle. The Blues are 6-point favorites with the bookies and 1 point with the algorithm. So the Blues go away to Canberra as ever so slight favourites. We will see if they are able to live up to that billing. It'll be a good test for them. And the last one is the Sunday game. The Highlanders and the Tars also looks like a pretty tidy one on paper. 4-8 the Highlanders, 7-5 the Waratahs. The Waratahs have been having a good year. The Highlanders have been having a stinker, but in recent weeks they have been good. So can they actually show us kind of that they're able to live up to that potential? I think maybe. They were so good last week, so slick. Liam Coltman's back. Remember, he's off at the end of the season. So, yeah, he gets a start at hooker. Sam Kidd's back in the second row. Josh Dixon, though, has kind of been their main line-out man this year. So again, if the Waratahs are going to get some pay, shutting down the ball to Josh Dixon would be certainly a good start. Lenchus Harmon and Mikel Letu is the same back row. Sam Gilbert's still there at 10, and man, he just took to that job like a duck to water speaking of bloody ducks, last week. So yeah, good to see him get another crack. That means Mitch Hunt is still riding the pine. Dennis Solomona is on the right wing. We haven't seen him play for a while. I think he got injured a few weeks back. So otherwise the lineup is very familiar. Dan Leonard-Brown gets a start after coming off the bench last week. Fakatava is likewise on the bench as well. Recently cleared for All Blacks duties if so needed later on this year. Waratahs are boosted by the return of Michael Hooper, although there's no Charlie Gamble this week. So I mean, honestly, Gamble's been in phenomenal form. He's one of the competition's top tacklers and top turnover guys. Jeff Cridge is likewise back in the second row. Will Harris switches to number 8, and Gleason's in at 6. So it's an all-new back row in terms of the numbers on people's backs this week. Alex Newsom shifts to the midfield in the absence of Izzy Parise, who was injured last week. He is probably the biggest loss that the Waratahs could have had. Like, honestly, if you told me keep Charlie Gamble in ahead of Hooper and still have Parise available, I think I would have taken that. Because Gamble's been in great form and Parise has just been absolutely X-Factor. So missing Parise, I think, is legit the biggest negative that the Waratahs could have had. But I mean, as I said, having Hoops is back, certainly a bit of a boost. Ben Donaldson, interestingly, moves to fullback because Ed Med is still at 10. Faulkner gets a start at loose head, but otherwise, I think pretty much the same. Jamie Roberts maybe can fill some of that big block-busting, ball-carrying stuff when he comes on from the bench. Highlanders are favourites for this one, but not massive favourites. 9 points with the bookies is comfortable enough. And the algorithm says Highlanders by 8, so pretty similar. The Highlanders have got the best line-out. Man, that rain. Best line-out in the competition with 91%. And they're actually putting on the odd sneaky line-out move now, which is pleasing, because previously they've just been bloody mauling it, but they seem to be varying it up a bit, which is pleasing. The Waratahs have got more offloads, more clean breaks than the Highlanders. They have been a fun team to watch this season, but it's going to be a tough job for them down in Dunedin. Alright folks, those are the games this weekend. I'm going to go see if there's a duck roaming around outside my place. I certainly heard something having a wee honk. Bizarre. Anyway, you folks take care of yourselves. There is a reserve down the road that has ducks on it, but they don't usually come this way. Anyway, you guys take care. I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.